In 3, 2, 1, go ahead.
Okay, good morning. Welcome to the Thurston County Board of County Commissioners work session, Thursday, April 22nd, 2021. It is 11:36 a.m. We have 2 hours lined up for a budget amendment 1 review. The public can follow along on the county YouTube channel or by our conference call line at 360-252-9020, PIN number 1234. Present is Vice Chair Commissioner Gary Edwards. My name is Ty Menser, Chair of the board, and we also have Commissioner Carolina Mejia, our County Manager Mira Chavez, and our Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell, who's also our budget czar, and her team, Olivia Ogman, Denise Doty, and Patty Rosetto, all here as well to walk us through. We've been in session consistently here now for a couple of hours, and we've got a couple hours more, so there may be some eating on screen or whatnot. Just the nature of the schedule today, we don't have any breaks, so we might take, if a commissioner needs a mid-session recess, just let me know. But I'll be turning this over, I guess, straight to Robin. Romero?
Romero, want to open it?
Yeah, thank you. This is the first meeting that we have scheduled for you to go through the budget amendment for the 2021 budget. And today is not expected for you to make decisions on all the requests. That is not the intent. And Robin is going to walk you through as to some of the budget instructions that we provided. And I would like to probably achieve an objective today with the board, is for you to agree on the principles as to what budget amendment is going to be, what elements you like to entertain. And when you have that agreement among yourselves, then that will be the lens in which you will review each of the requests that we'll walk you through. If it's not today, entirely, maybe next week, which we have already scheduled a meeting. So Robin is going to walk you through the details of the overall process, timelines, as well as the budget instructions included on the budget related to amendments. With that in mind, Robin?
Thank you, Romero.
Could I, Chair, could I have a question, please, first, quick?
Sure.
I had a certain amount of information in my, that I took home with me last night. And then I was told that there is some new information. I'm just wondering, should I disregard everything I had last night, or is there just a little bit of new
No, sir. What has been added to you this morning is just the PowerPoint presentation.
Oh, okay, good enough. Thank you, that's good.
Great. All of the detailed documents, the line item budget requests, are the same ones that were turned in early this week.
Okay.
And we'll be talking about those as we go through, because things have changed in the system, and we'll let you know what those changes are as we go. So I'm gonna jump right in and share my screen. Share screen. This one. All right. So we are talking about the first budget amendment in this year's annual budget. And as you know, we plan 2 budget amendments every year, but there are times like last year when we do more. So this is our normally scheduled spring budget amendment. Today we're going to talk about the schedule for this amendment, the summary of the requests at a very high level, and then I hope that we spend a good deal of time giving you an opportunity to discuss the process, because we've been talking recently about what a fair process will look like in budget development, and then as Romero stated, hopefully come to an agreement on what will be included in the amendment, and then we'll start the reviews. And we received over 100 budget change requests, which is quite a lot for a budget amendment. So this is review part 1, and we have put more time on your calendar next week. Usually we would schedule 1 hour with you to review an amendment. We have 2 hours today and additional time next week. It's a lot. So the schedule. Originally, we had planned a shorter schedule for this amendment, and a few things have happened. I do want to point out to you that all of the budget requests were due from offices and departments just last Thursday. Our team has had them for a very, very short amount of time. And as I said, over 100 requests, that is a lot. So we have not had time to work through all of them. Actually, the team has looked at every one of them. They worked over the weekend, but we had things coming in from offices and departments late, new information, changes, even this week. So that's why when we go through the documents that you've had, we'll be noting where changes have been made. So the due date was last Thursday. We had scheduled today for your review and final decisions next week. We would have published the notice of intent on May 11th and 18th. And according to state law, a budget amendment requires notice in 2 weeks, a notice each week for the 2 weeks preceding the board taking action. They do not require a public hearing. So we had planned to issue the notice on May 11th and 18th and have you adopt on May 25th. However, a few things have happened. Number one was so many budget requests, you need more time to work through them, and so do we. And the other thing that has come up is the opportunity that we are exploring for moving to the 3000 Pacific Avenue building. That needs to be added to your capital improvement plan. And the law allows for the CIP to be amended along with any budget amendment. So one of the things you'll see in this amendment proposal is the addition of money to do the tenant improvements at the 3000 Pacific building. You may also hear me call it the atrium. That's the building's nickname. So we have now aligned the budget adoption schedule with the time it will take to amend the CIP. We've added a public hearing for both the CIP and the budget, and we have a new adoption date. So now here we are on the first day of board review. Next week will be an additional day for review. We'll ask for final decisions by May 14th. We'll request that the board set the public hearing at an afternoon meeting on May 25th. We will publish our notice of intent to adopt on June 8th and 15th, hold the public hearing on June 22nd, and you will adopt the amendment June 29th. So that is the new schedule plan. Do you have any questions about that?
Yes, I do when the time comes.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
I don't know where this is at because I don't have it doesn't have a page number. Anyway, I'm going to hold this up. This is 21 and 22 budget amendments, it says. And then it refers to some RCWs, provides authorities, and the law allows for supplemental appropriations as a result of unanticipated receipts of federal, state, local resources, and for transfers or revisions within departments. And then the next paragraph down is For 21 and 22, budget amendments will be limited to emergencies, technical corrections, updates to budgeted. Is all this still applicable? That's kind of what I'm asking is.
Commissioner, I think that you have moved ahead. Um, so we'll get to that part, please.
Okay.
We won't
Okay,
forget
good
that
enough.
you have questions. That's
Okay,
when
thank you.
we talk about the process.
Okay,
Right now, just any questions about the schedule?
okay, thank you.
All right.
I do. Just with pushing the schedule back, and I've never done this before, but I know we have to set the June 29th, and then starting in September, is it not, we start the budget for next year?
That's correct.
So isn't doing these amendments and having a June 29th deadline plus having another, isn't that too close? Is it just fine? Is it all just going to run together?
So it will be just fine. We will make it fine. It does push the amendment out quite late in terms of us adding any decisions that you make to ongoing numbers, because while the board receives the preliminary one budget in September, offices and departments will begin working on the budget prior to this amendment being adopted. So it does cause it to run together. However, the amendment to the CIP cannot happen any sooner than this. So we are rather locked in to this delay. We'll make it work.
Thank you.
Okay, we're ready. Go ahead, Robin.
Okay, great. This is the very high level request of the impact of these requests. As you see, I've broken it down kind of into buckets, and we'll review according to these buckets. Some are easier for decisions, some are things that you will want to take a little more time considering. So we have technical changes. Those are things that we see all the time. Most of them have no impact on the bottom line. However, there are, at the state, we used to call them errors and omissions in the original budget. We have found a few things in the original budget that need to be fixed. So technical changes will increase 45,000 in revenue, 636,000 in expenditures in the general fund. And as you see, about 5 million in both revenue and expenditures in other funds. And we'll get into the details, not now, but as we go through these detailed sheets. This just gives you an overview. For operating carry forward, these are projects or assignments that the board approved in 2020 that for all kinds of reasons didn't get completed last year. There are no general fund items where someone requested carry forward. There are 3.3 million in expenditures in other funds. And again, you'll get the details as we go through. Maintenance level are routine things to continue expenditures at the level of service that has already been approved by the board. That will increase the general fund. I'm going to say revenue, but it's not money coming in the door, because what you'll see is this is mainly an adjustment of our fund balance, our beginning fund balance. And again, I'll explain that when we get there. But our fund balance increases in the general fund $6.4 million. That has, by the way, already been included in the forecasts that you have seen so far this year. The expenditures are reduced in the general fund by 11,000. And then other funds, fund balance changes, again, being the main driver, are increased $26.9 million. Grants is the big thing right now. Grants is one of the most common reasons to amend your budget. We get unanticipated revenue, and the big thing coming in this year is the money from the American Rescue Fund or Plan, the ARP. $26 million receipt this year. We will spend that. So what you see here is the revenue from grants is equal to or more than the expenditure of grants, because sometimes it takes more than 1 year to spend it. So 28.7 million in revenue, 28.6 million in expenditures in the general fund, nearly 62 million in revenue in other funds, and 64 million in expenditures. That is in part because some of the revenue was booked at the end of the year last year. And again, the bulk of this is money coming in response to COVID. Capital policy requests are all in other funds, some new revenue coming in and increased expenditures, 1.4 million. Operating policy requests, very little revenue in the general fund, $14,000, but 3.4 million in expenditures has been requested. That includes 2 million for the reserve for the budget stabilization account. And then in other funds, new revenue at a policy level of nearly 9 million and expenditures of over 20 million. And then we have a few requests to reinstate the 2020 budget cuts, just under $1 million in general fund expenditures and 259,000 in other funds, for a grand total of changes in an amendment that are very high for an amendment. 35.2 million in revenue, 33.4 million in expenditures in the general fund, other funds 103.4 million in revenue, and 94 million in other funds. So again, a snapshot, but a whole lot of money for you to consider. Here's the budget instructions. This is the part of the conversation that is policy. And Commissioner Edwards, I believe that this is what you were speaking to, because I think that the page that you have is a page out of the budget instructions verbatim. This catches the meaning of the instructions on this slide. We have state laws, and they're noted here, that direct counties. This is specific to counties. Counties are given direction under state law about how to develop a budget. And there is authority provided to commissioners to amend county budgets for unanticipated receipts, and for transfers or revisions within departments. And that's what the law says right there. So our instructions go on to say that budget amendments will be limited to emergencies, technical corrections, updates to beginning fund balances, and new awards or grants from outside sources. So
is that where I get, is this where I get to ask the questions?
yes. Yes, now is the time for the ones I believe you were raising.
Okay, so now I guess we're doing budget amendments because, I guess because of the additional funds must be why, right?
That, absolutely.
Right, okay. But if you get additional funds, can you use them any way you want? Or can you, well, I suppose you have to follow the guidelines that come with the funds, but can you adjust everything else in the budget based on whatever money you get, so you can open up one area, even if you got $100,000 instead of, 20-some million, 28 million, is that what we got? Anyway, if you got $100,000, could you disperse that through everywhere legally? That's what I'm wondering about. Are we locked in on what we can adjust and put money into as part of this adjustment? And maybe I am not articulating that exactly right. Do you get what I'm shooting at?
Well, let's see if my response addresses, because I think I do, but
Okay.
but I'm sure that you will clarify. So the restriction, if we've got money coming in from outside sources, and I think that the American Rescue Plan is a great example. We've got $26 million about to come in the door.
Okay.
There are federal rules on how the money may be used. As long as we stay within those rules, then we can adjust our budget for wherever the board, because it is the decision of the board to make how money is used. So we can adjust our budget in response to the direction that the board gives on how we plan to use the money. But it all has to be within federal rules. Another example that we'll see, I'm sure, is a grant for the road fund. The Public Works quite often brings in grants throughout the year. They bring those forward in budget requests. And those grants are usually pretty specific for a certain project. So if we receive a grant from the Department of Transportation that says it can be used on a roundabout in the Grand Mound area on, I'm going to just say Sergeant Road, let's say, then that's the only way it can be used. And when you amend the budget, you would add that to the Public Works capital project budget. So it really is, the new unanticipated receipts really are governed by the rules of the grant that we receive.
Oh, okay, so I think you are answering the question for me. It's just, as we move forward with this $26 million, it's got its own set of guidelines. If somebody donated, I don't know, out of the goodness of their heart, $100,000, no strings attached, can we open up the budget process and make adjustments just based on that? Or does it have to be an emergency or, limited to emergency technical corrections, that kind of thing? I was just trying to figure out how that all fit. Is part of it state law and part of it is our own guidelines?
I think that the foundation is state law, and we build our guidelines to ensure that we are operating in accordance with the law. And I think that, the $100,000 question that you just asked is also an excellent example. If someone from the goodness of their heart said, here's 100,000, use it as you see fit, that would be an unanticipated receipt. And the state law allows for unanticipated receipts. You could then, in the budget amendment, add that money to be spent as you see fit in the spirit in which it was donated.
Okay, I think that answers my question. Thank you.
Okay. So you know, basically bottom line, what I'm saying is we have rules we have to follow, and the budget team has written those rules down and communicated them to the offices and departments um, in the form of budget instructions. Any other questions about the instructions? Well, you may have more as we go. So here are the types of requests that we got in this amendment. There's requests for new FTEs, new equipment. There's training money that offices and departments are asking you for. There's something about contract amendments. You're going to see requests for a restoration of the 2020 budget cuts. There is a request in here for funding in response to legislative changes. And some offices or departments ask for items that they didn't get in the original budget that the board has already said no to. And while some of these things fit quite nicely in the instructions and the rules that we have set, some do not. And this is where we get to the conversation about creating a fair and equitable process. We go ahead.
No, go ahead. That was
Okay. So
just scratching my hair.
Sorry, hair scratch your head.
This is a head scratcher, yes. So I want to describe to you something that I heard at a conference that I got to go to in real life 3 years ago when those things were happening. The presenter they were talking about fair and equitable budget processes and what's fair to everyone. And he described this as the it's all good budget syndrome. And basically what he said was that every request that comes before the board is for something good that the community wants. Every single request it's good. And I would say that with extremely few exceptions, over the past 12 years that I've been at the county, and in the many years that I spent developing budgets at the state, there were very, very few things that the leaders did not want to fund. But your restriction is the amount of resources available to you and the amount of money that we have to spend. So what the presenter was describing that I would like to convey to you is that when people do not follow the rules, and some people come in with requests that are what you'll hear me call out of cycle or not in the general budget, and other people hold back and follow the rules, the board does not have everything that the county needs in front of you to consider. And if you say yes to these things, they're good things, but you might not be funding the most important things. And you will, when you see those more important things come before you, the money to pay for them will already have been spent on less important things. So that is it's all good. I am not at any point suggesting as we go through the items that you will review today that these are not good things to fund. I will not be saying that they're not needed things. These are things that the community wants, but you don't have everything in front of you that fit those criteria. So here's the consequences of going down the road that we are possibly on. We may not be on this path, but the immediate consequences is that we're spending a lot of time on what should be a pretty simple amendment process. As I said, I normally schedule an hour with you for review. We have 2 hours today. We have more time next week, and that's before I even start to ask you to make decisions. So there's a lot of time. Staff are spending a lot of time, a lot of extra time that they wouldn't necessarily spend. And we may not spend money on the most important things that you don't see come forward. And then we get back to this sense of, is the process fair? People don't think so. Because those who play by the rules and didn't send something forward are losers, if you will. They're not getting money that other offices and departments that didn't play by the rules would get. And that causes anger and distrust. And here's an example of that we heard as we were putting this amendment together. One of the offices or departments commented to one of the budget staff, I heard that other departments were putting in to get their 2% cutback. We didn't do that because we knew we weren't supposed to. But if someone else gets theirs, we want ours too. So we're already faced with the perception that this is not a fair process. And you've heard that in elected official meetings. We've heard that from our departments. So it's important that we make a decision before we even review what's been asked for about how this process is going to address the concept of a fair playing field. I threw this slide in. I think 2 commissioners have seen this before. The GFOA, which is Government Finance Officers Association, they've been doing a lot of work around this, and they have presented a framework for financial foundations for thriving communities. It has 5 pillars. These are considered best practices in budgeting. They are in the process of putting out guidance for executives on how to implement these pillars. But you see that the foundation is to establish a long-term vision. You have a strategic plan, build trust and open communication, use collective decision-making, create clear rules, and to treat everyone fairly. And it's these 2 pillars that we're talking about today, the creation of clear rules and treating everyone fairly. So here's what I have recommended to you. We think that the budget amendments should include emergencies. We should include legislative changes from the 2021 session, because if they're changes from prior years, those should have come forward in the budget cycle. But I would characterize current legislative changes as an emergency in some cases. I think that we should do the fixes to the original budget. I told you that we'd found some errors. Those need to be fixed for the budget to be fair. We should make the technical corrections. Grants, of course, that's our unanticipated receipts. So all grants where revenue equals expenditures or is more than expenditures, I would encourage you to approve. And then we've been talking about carry forward. And that's where the board has already approved the activity and it just didn't get finished last year for whatever reason. So any requests to carry forward money for projects that were already planned, I would encourage you to approve. And then I would encourage you to say no to everything else. So I'd like to open it up right now for you to discuss the concepts or ask questions of me about these concepts. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Okay. I do have some questions, but I'm not in a hurry to get to them.
Okay. I hit you on a couple before, Commissioner Edwards. Let's go to Commissioner Mejia. Let's go backwards. Commissioner Mejia.
I would rather hear the questions from the rest of the commissioners since this is my first budget, if that's okay.
My question, or one question I have is, it's not really a question. I'm just asking if, back on your slide number 6, you don't have to flip it, but just so you can look at it, you know what I'm talking about. You've got examples of the kinds of requests we have this time. FTs, equipment, training, contract amendments. Now, the implication there is some of those are out of cycle or are not according to the rules. I mean, but I would say you can't really pigeonhole that categorically. I mean, if the pandemic, for example, thrust new responsibilities that might require an FTE to meet those responsibilities in response to an emergency, obviously that could be appropriate. But I guess looking at that last category, when it's something that the office or department asked for last fall and didn't get, and it's back in an amendment, with the exception of I mean, I could contort an example that might fit, but I would think 98% of the time, those are just not appropriate and categorically shouldn't be included in the amendment. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, I would say all of that is a fair statement. I do think that we should be looking at these items line by line, which is why we've scheduled so much time with you, because I think you're absolutely right.
Like
some of these things fit just great. Some will not.
And increased training, for example, like last year we had an example where the legislature passed something that required, or I think it was 2 years ago, the sheriff's office had to engage in training. So that would be appropriate because it was training responding to a legislative change and stuff. But in general, just to say my training budget's inadequate, you know, that's something to be addressed next fall.
Yes, I would agree.
Okay. Commissioner Edwards.
As we move forward on this, I mean, there's been past occasions since I've been here that we made decisions and then on a particular topic, and then we got farther down the road and saw, well, that topic conflicted with this issue. So I don't know, as we've always adhered to all these good budget syndrome things closely, but I think lately we've been trying to. But I do think there's a big difference between elected officials and department directors. We oversee all the departments. We don't oversee elected officials other than their budget activity. So I'm just going to use Mary Hall's recent issue that we talked about earlier in the week. And we made a decision that that position should go to Mary Hall for whatever reason. Doesn't matter. We already made that decision. So why shouldn't she, as an elected official, if she felt that she needed that position, why shouldn't she put in for it anyway? Because we're just the budget overseers. And if she could make an argument to us, we can tell all our department directors, you do it this way and live within your budget. I don't think we get that luxury from the other elected officials. If for some reason we had eliminated half of the prosecutors from the prosecutor's office, which would be irresponsible, I believe he has every right to come back and say, wait a minute, look what you guys did, and explain this. So I agree with everything you're saying with our departments and department directors under us, basically, under the county commissioners. I don't necessarily agree. I'm aligned more with the elected officials as for them having some leeway. Now, to what leeway that is and what we're going to grant if they do ask, and then I'll just fall back on this thing. We decided that, well, we needed somebody to watch the CARES money, and somehow that there was a disagreement on about where it should be, and we made a decision on that.
No decisions were made, Commissioner, on that
They
one.
weren't?
Nope. You took out of the agenda. That was the decision.
We took it what? Out of what?
You took the item out of your agenda. That was the decision on Tuesday.
Well, it sure looked like to me, I mean, we might not have taken an official vote, but I thought my seatmates and myself had aligned with Mary Hall. Are you saying that's not true?
That was not what occurred on Tuesday.
Well, I guess I got to ask my seatmates. I had pretty well thought we'd made that decision. And if not, I'd like to hear from my seatmates that we did or didn't.
Okay, well, it's kind of off topic, but I can, the proposal that, if I was going to be forced to a vote that morning, I was going to side with Mary Hall, just where things landed that morning. But Ramiro then proposed, let us pull this back and see if we can work something through that can meet the mutually acceptable to both sides. And that was what the board decided to do. So I'm waiting to see what comes out of further discussions. And I have not decided about that position in any kind of formal. We didn't take a formal vote on it. We just, because the board was leaning toward the auditor, basically there was a proposal to let's pull this back and see if we can come to a win-win.
I guess I would ask, is that the county manager imposing his agenda over our agenda?
No,
so
sir.
Ramiro, can I answer this?
Please.
Go ahead, Commissioner Mejia.
So, no, actually it was Auditor Hall who said she wanted to get her staff and the commissioner staff, both Ramiro and Robin, to come to an agreement. So she sent a follow-up letter to that request, with that request, saying they wanted to come to an agreement on this. So Auditor Hall and her, I believe it's her chief auditor, Diana Benson, is, I'm not sure if that meeting has already been setting a meeting with Robin and also Ramiro. So I think the decision at that time was, we'll wait till that meeting takes place. And then after that, it can come in front of the commissioners for a decision.
Okay, that makes sense.
So I really feel compelled to answer that. The county manager does not have an agenda to impose to the commissioners. The county manager brings proposals and the board provides direction. And that's what you did on Tuesday. So if the board doesn't agree with the proposal, the county manager, any staff, you vote on it.
Right. No, and that happened. I remember asking for put on your proposal. You were looking for a way forward because we were way beyond time in that particular part of the meeting. But going back to the bigger picture at issue here, I wanted to just say that I just want to respond to Commissioner Edwards when he said, and I'll get to you, Robin, about the elected officials. I just wanted to respond that I agree with him that elected officials can ask for whatever they want. We're not gonna issue a demerit or fine them or something like that. They have the leeway to ask for what they want to ask for, but we're trying to come to, between the three of us, a way of handling those requests. We can deny them all if we decide because they don't meet the guidelines that we've set up for ourselves to try to discipline this process and not create perception of unfairness and all the reasons that Robin ticked through. So I guess there's that difference between what folks can ask us, and again, we're not going to. The elected officials are independent and they've got their own considerations, and if they think they need something, they can ask for it. It doesn't mean that we're going to grant it. Robin, what did you have?
Can I say something? I'm sorry. Yeah, and I agree with what Commissioner Menser said in that regard. I think those guidelines are more for us. more than anything on what we should consider going forward. I mean, we are the budget overseers and we are in charge of the budget. And so I feel we need guidelines on, and sure, elected officials can submit, what they want, but in the end, it's really up to us to enforce those rules. And so I feel like the buck really does stop with us.
And I agree with that.
Okay, very good. Robin, go ahead.
Thank you. And I would like to use the example that Commissioner Edwards has offered for an FTE in the auditor's office. Should the board decide to approve that FTE, it would be under the grants category because we have new revenue in the form of a grant that would be used to pay for that FTE. And that's why when you look at page 6, new FTEs, as Commissioner Manser had suggested, it's not all are in or all are out. Each one needs to be considered on its merit and what it would be used for.
Well, you're looking for, so, I mean, I can say that I feel like this exact slide was presented to the previous board. When I say exact slide, I mean slide 11. And we did, I would say, a mediocre job at best of adhering to it. Especially, we were a little tighter last year because of the pandemic. At the time of an amendment, we were dealing with a lot of uncertainty. I think the board was more disciplined in 2020. I don't feel like in 2019, in 2019, one of the most overwhelming things there were 150 something in my first budget amendment back in spring of 2019. And creating a new budget was a lot simpler than dealing with that particular amendment. That was really just seemed wild and woolly in terms of the nature of the requirements, and they were all over the map. And I don't think we were very disciplined in adhering to these lenses, as Ramirez called it, or guidelines. We were just kind of going line by line, and what Robin said at the beginning was really frustrating for me because I didn't feel like I could judge a request that sounded good on its face without knowing without having gone through the totality and being able to make those trade-offs. Okay, if we fund these 7 things, then what's going to get squeezed out, or how far is the fund balance going to fall, or whatever. So it's important to have a process that allows us to avoid those pitfalls that were outlined at the beginning of this presentation today. The good budget syndrome, or whatever you called it. It's all good.
It's all good. It's
all good. And that's what I felt overwhelmed by that. That's what I'm saying is I felt overwhelmed by that exact problem in early 2019. I was new. All these things seemed legitimate. I didn't know if this was normally how it was, or if folks were asking for things. We were not being strict with respect to these parameters, because that would have made things simpler in a sense and more consistent. I didn't, it was very difficult to manage. So I guess the board, what I understood Ramiro to be asking the board for here this morning is how strict do we want to be, before we get into the specifics, how strict do we want to be about these lenses, these filters, if you would call it that.
Yeah, and that would be, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Ramiro.
No, that is an excellent point that I would like for you as a board to agree on. What I call is the lenses in which you're going to be reviewing all the different requests. Slide 11 is a proposal from the staff. Whether you like to add any additional elements on your, it is up to you really. Please, this is a proposal for you to consider as starting the conversation. That I strongly encourage the board to agree in principle what those guidelines will be for you to go through and use that lens when you review the different proposals. I believe that is, from my point of view, important because you create fairness. across the county.
I have a comment.
Yes, Commissioner Edwards.
I guess another example maybe I would use, I don't know that the first one was the best, maybe this isn't either, but the coroner has explained a problem that he is faced with, that if we don't recognize that problem, we're going to end up spending more money than we would to recognize the problem. So how does that fit in here? And that, you know, again, is an elected office. I guess we could tell them to go jump in the lake, but I don't think that's very responsible. So that's my question, I guess, to Robin or Romero.
Wouldn't that constitute as an emergency? Like if it's something that,
What was that, Commissioner?
well, under budget amendments, it include emergencies. And if it's something that's an emergent issue, I think it would fall under that. Wouldn't it?
I
Robin
would
and my.
hope so, because I do think it is an emergent issue for the
Well,
coroner. Yeah.
I think the budget amendments that have been proposed, I think I agree with them. I'll just lay it out there. I do agree with, I think these are what we should be considering, which are emergencies. Legislative changes from the 2021 session, that includes the State v. Blake decision, which is, I know, a big thing that our offices, a lot of people in our offices are dealing with. The fixes to the original budget, technical corrections, grants for revenue equals expenditures, and carry forwards for projects begun in 2020. I don't think we should be adding anything else. I don't know. I know that trainings got, Robin, I know trainings got cut last year for a certain amount of time. And how many departments asked for trainings?
We'll see. I didn't count the number of each of the types of requests, so I couldn't tell you just offhand, but we'll, as we go through, we'll see. But I mean, that kind of falls in the category of restoring the 2% budget cuts.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay.
And I would also add that the instructions that were sent with the 2% cuts was that those were intended to be ongoing into the future. They were not intended as one-time cuts.
The coroner, just as an example, I think the pandemic, for example, there's significant flexibility within these parameters for the board to consider. That one, an employee was lost because of COVID, essentially, and you might reformulate that in a different way that's better for the ongoing future, but that kind of precipitated the issue, and I think could be considered by the board. Just responding to that example, while still adhering to these principles. Training, I don't know about that, because trainings seem to be, at least for the kind of trainings I do, you can do a lot more for a lot less money because everything's virtual and you're not traveling and the fee. So I'm not sure that anybody's training budget needs to be in a budget amendment, but I don't know that fits anywhere within these, unless it's a response to a legislative change.
I guess we open for comment there yet, sir?
Go ahead, yeah. We're trying to wrap this up, I think.
Okay. Okay, this will be quick. I think definition has a lot to do, what's the definition of each one of these checks down here, and how we determine what is an emergency, what is affixed to the original budget, what's the difference between that and technical corrections, I guess. I mean, if you have 10 lawyers in the room, you got 10 different opinions on what's right or whatever, if you're having arguments. So I just think that we can make things fit in almost anywhere here if the situation is right, I guess. We just have to agree on it as we're going along to make it fit. So I'm okay with following these guidelines, because I think at some future point we might have a discussion of what's the definition of you know, A, B, C, or
Yeah.
whatever. So I'm good with it. Okay.
Commissioner Mejia, go ahead.
So with the definitions, though, we would be sending specific boundaries to each one of them. And I feel like it doesn't offer the flexibility that it does now. If we put definitions to things, it's going to be, I don't know, I feel like it sets specific boundaries to each of the different amendments that we're considering.
I mean, I don't think that anybody's saying, what Commissioner Edwards is saying is that there is flexibility in individual interpretations of these categories, and we can hammer it out between the three of us, and we may differ in our interpretation of what falls within the emergency or whatever, but maybe that's appropriate that we have that level to give ourselves that comfort level that we can argue for our interpretation. But as long as we have these principles, it might help to a significant degree to knock out things that are just, that not anyone's going to be able to argue are within these categories. I don't know.
Right.
Okay, I misunderstood. I apologize, Commissioner Edwards. I thought Commissioner Edwards was requesting definitions, and I was.
No, it's all good. We're all good. I like a lot of time for discussions myself to clarify things. I like it. So, no, I'm good. Thank you.
Yes, Robert.
Well, I would suggest to you that one underlying, almost foundational definition is that something couldn't have been expected when it was time to do the budget. Because the whole concept of unanticipated is addressed in state law. And if you knew it was coming, or you knew you had a problem, or you should have been thinking about it, quite frankly, you should have come in so the board could consider it in the original budget.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, sometimes, yeah, and again, agree in principle. There may be case by case circumstances where somebody tried to make something work. They could see there was this much of a problem, and so they tried to make it work to stay within their budget. But the reality, as time unfolded and circumstances changed, it turned out that it was 5 times the problem, and now they've got to come and ask. And I mean, those things happen, and the board's going to obviously consider those things.
Yes. So these are flexible, and at the end of the day, the decision is yours to make.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's just, guiding principles in a way just to go through the process. So what I understand, what I'm hearing is, I do have an agreement from the board members to use this guiding principles as you go through and review the budget amendments. Is that correct?
That's correct. Commissioner Edwards had a good question about what's the difference between technical corrections and fixes to the original budget? Is there a distinction there?
Yes. As you'll see when we review these, there are a few things where we saw like something got entered twice in the original budget, and it should have only been in there once. That, I suppose you could call that technical, but we wanted to be very transparent. So we're letting you know that was something that we missed in the original budget scrub. And there are a few things like that. And that happens. And I've said this before as well, in a budget where there are thousands and thousands of line items and code, we're gonna miss a few things. And so it's normal. At the state, it was called errata. We submitted that every year to the legislature when I was in the governor's office, and we're submitting it to our county legislature, the Board of County Commissioners now.
And then give us an example of a technical correction as a distinction.
So technical corrections are things that are required by accounting rules, and one example of that is the purchase of copy machines. If we lease a copy machine, we are required by accounting rules to record the full value of the copier in our current year budget as an expenditure, and we also record the revenue that goes along with it so that there's no impact to the fund balance because it's not money going out the door. And that is a technical thing required by accounting rules.
Another example of a technical correction is a pass-through. For instance, the TCOM 911, we just pass through the revenue and we just receive additional revenue. They will need to adjust that to pass through. That's another example of a technical correction.
Right.
Okay, good. Well, it sounds like we're good to go then. We need to.
So this would be a good opportunity to take a short break, maybe 5 minutes, before we start jumping into these lists of requests.
Perfect. It is 12:36. Let's go to 12:43.
In 3, 2, 1, go ahead.
We're back in session here, 12:44 p.m. The budget amendment walkthrough, and we have another 45 minutes slated. We're going to get into the individual requests, and I'll turn it right back to Robin.
Okay, so the packet that you have is in the order that I'd like to address the amendments. So the very first one is technical and transfers. I'm going to share my screen so the public can see what we're talking about. I would, before we begin, say that this is the board's opportunity to ask any questions you may have, that staff can go back to the offices and departments, get answers for you, and get answers to your questions that we would have either next week or before you make final decisions on this. So again, I'm not looking for thumbs up or thumbs down at this point. If we talk about each line, I may suggest where staff think this falls within the criteria or doesn't. So sharing the screen. Screen 2. I like to think I'm getting better at this. So the very first item, again, we're on technical and transfers.
And Robin, could you do me a favor and explain what that means?
So these, again, these are technical amendments. They're routine things. They're things that are required by accounting code or that we've already agreed to. And you'll see an example of that. And transfers are usually where we're transferring money from one fund to another, and it all nets out to zero with little impact on the general fund.
And I do have a question on that, please.
Go ahead.
2020, under 2021 expenditure change starts off with 15,000 in parentheses. Then it goes down. I mean, it's got, you know, from 5,000, I see 11,000, 2,000, 200, $28, $10, those kind of numbers. Are those all dollar figures?
Those are in whole dollars. Yes, sir.
So are we going to go over stuff, you know, I don't know. I mean, aren't we kind of being micro?
This is absolute minutia when you got a line for $87, and I have, as part of the budget instructions, instituted that we will come before the board with nothing that is less than $1,000 of impact. But what you'll hear as we work through these is lines number 2 through line number
41.
41 are the individual code items for one single request, which is a credit card rebate distribution. And the reason that this is technical is last year we heard from the state auditor. You know, I can currently explain this, but before I get into each line item, to answer your question, Commissioner, you would bundle about 40 lines into one request. So I'm not going to ask you to look at every one of these very small dollar amounts.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. So let's go. Line number 1 is a capital lease adjustment, and this is technical. The auditor discovered that they had recorded too much revenue and are reducing the revenue and the expenditures to match. So it's a net zero in a capital lease adjustment. Capital leases are generally for copy machines or equipment like that. Then we have lines number 2 through 41, which is the credit card rebate distribution. That is every year when we use our credit card, the county's credit card, part of our agreement with the credit card company is we get a rebate, a lot like some people do on their personal credit cards, cash back, in some cases 2% of our purchases. So we strongly encourage offices and departments to use the credit card when they can, so we get this rebate. Well, we used to just reduce expenditures in an office or department budget when we received the rebate, but we got a notice from the state auditor that that was an incorrect way to handle this accounting transaction. Instead, we must record the rebate as revenue, and it's revenue when it comes in. So the revenue was recorded in 2020. And the way to preserve the incentive for offices and departments is we told them at the direction of the board that we would amend the budgets by the amount that they saved by using the credit card. So, for example, on line 2, the assessor saved $503 because he used the county credit card. So as an incentive, we're saying, here's $500. You can use it in one-time type expenditures. We're adjusting your budget this year. These are all one time because each year we'll give each office and department the amount that they save. So do you have any questions about in whole the credit card rebate?
No, I do not.
I don't.
Great. It is a very popular incentive program. So we're dropping now all the way down to item 42, which is a $5 million transaction. It's a pass-through to TCOM. TCOM is not a governmental entity in the eyes of the state auditor when it comes to collection of taxes. One of their funding streams is a sales tax that supports the TCOM operations, and the county must collect that on behalf of TCOM. When it comes into us, it's treated as a revenue. We pass pretty much the entire amount of collections. I think we pass through everything that we collect through TCOM. And the sales tax, as you have noticed, is coming in much higher than we had anticipated. So we are adding the amount of $5 million in revenue and increasing the corresponding amount of expenditures so that we have enough appropriation capacity to pass everything through to TCOM when it comes. Questions about that?
So zero effect on everything.
Yep, net zero, and you have a proviso in the budget that says we will not pay TCOM the amount of the appropriation. Instead, we will only pay them the amount that we receive in revenue. So no effect on the county, which is why it's technical. The next line item is for Superior Court. They have amendment that they are asking for. This could just as easily have fit in the carry forward category, but it came with revenue and it nets to zero. It could have fallen into the grant category, but it's not a new grant. That's why it's not there. So this is for the Safe Baby Grant that Superior Court received in 2020. They did not spend the grant and are asking to bring it forward, both the revenue that will be received and the expenditure. It's technical.
just let me, commissioners, just jump in if you have questions, but don't have to raise your hand or wait to be acknowledged.
Yes, and please do jump in because I can't see you looking at this
It's
picture.
harder for me to see too, and then we're in small form, so.
Line number 44 is from Central Services. This is an internal service rate correction. This could have been in the fixes, but it's technical because it is a fix. That's why it's in this category. All of the budget error corrections are in this category. So we found that the rate that was attributed to the courthouse project was entered twice. The increase in the budget was entered twice, so we are backing out half of the amount that was put into this fund for internal service payments.
And then where does that go?
It's just less that fund can spend. It doesn't go anywhere.
So okay, so there's not any additional money or anything, it's just
It's
less to be expended.
it's an error. It's an error.
It's just an error. Okay, good enough.
Right. Nobody's going to spend anything.
Okay.
And that fund shouldn't have that much budget authority. So line 45 is for the clerk in the general fund. And this actually is lines 45, 46, 7, 8, 9, 50, and 51. So the clerk, community planning, human resources, public defense, Superior Court, and human resources were impacted by an error in the budget where the reduction for vacant positions that were eliminated, the cut was taken twice. And this restores half of that because, and the way that happened, it's my understanding, was a function of the budget system. We have a salaries and benefits module, and we have an operating budget module. The reduction was entered in the salaries module and it was entered in the operating module. It really only needed to be in one place. So all of these offices need this money restored because they only lost one position. Okay.
So where does money end up going somewhere back in the general fund, or what happens?
This is an impact on the general fund and other funds, and you see the fund that's impacted in the third column of this worksheet. So the clerk's budget, for example, will be increased by $51,232. That's an impact to the general fund. The community planning budget, they lost a position. Again, the reduction was entered twice, so we need to restore $109,000 to their budget out of the general fund.
So then, like, the ending fund balance changes a little bit? Is that it?
Yes. Yes.
Well, quite a little bit in this little bunch here, 400,000 or something.
That is accurate, yes.
And how does that affect our ending fund balance when we talk about having that certain amount that we want to have at all times?
Yes.
Do we need to do something different, or?
That is the other piece of this conversation that I will have ready for you next week. I don't have the forecast piece for you today, but you will have it next week when we continue this conversation.
And the forecast piece might be like sales tax, property tax, that kind of thing?
It will include all of those things,
Yeah,
Commissioner.
okay. Okay.
Yep. It's part of the reason I'm not asking for decisions today is you don't have the full picture today. The next item is line 52. This is from the clerk. It is the copy machine that I use for the classic technical example. This is entered because of accounting rules. We enter both the revenue and the expenditure. There's no impact to our funds. Line 53 is from treatment sales tax. There was an error in the way that personnel was entered for drug court. There's a function in the system that has allocations that's kind of complicated. We've worked with staff on how to use the system, but we still occasionally see that allocations are not quite accurate. So this will add $28,000 to Superior Court to pay for the position that the board had authorized and this is the treatment sales tax fund. Line number 54 is for the sheriff. This is to pay for the medical costs for K9 Arlo. We have received grants and donations that will cover those costs. So, excuse me, we are adding both the revenue and the expenditure. Again, it could have fallen into a different category, but it seemed to fit here because it's a technical entry. The next.
Edwards was joking when he said if somebody decided to give resources to the county,
but he wasn't, he was far off. We occasionally do get money from citizens saying use it. Most of them want us to use it for a very specific purpose, like for K9 Arlo, but sometimes we get money. Line 55 is for the sheriff's special programs, and line, okay, it's just 55. This is a technical adjustment because of the way that we budget for benefits, and it's an accounting code issue. We've changed the accounting code structure, so you should not see this in the future, but because of the way we did the benefits for 2021, there were benefits for the sheriff's special programs that were taken out of the base budget that we need to put back for $6,000.
Is that like L&I fund, payment and stuff like that?
It is payment for that, and it's tied to extra help.
Okay.
So when we have extra help, we have to pay benefits usually, and those got taken out even though the extra help wasn't, so we need to restore that. Line 56 is another example of the copier for the sheriff's corrections. Line 57 is public defense for treatment sales tax, again, tied to a budget allocation for FTEs. This time it's going the opposite direction. They allocated too much. Line 58 is the auditor's office. It's an adjustment to the cost plan. And actually, I believe that this is lines 58, 59, 60, and 61. When the budget was developed for our CPED office, Community Planning Economic Development Office, we were in the midst of doing a change for direct appropriation, and the allocations didn't align with the changes that we were making. So this fix ensures that the allocations for interfund costs in CPED are aligned to the appropriate fund. And this aligns with the conversation you were having yesterday about the lake management districts. We have to ensure that internal services are charged to the fund that uses the services, and that's what this fix is all about. Line 60.
I do have a question. I have a question on that, Robin, just quick.
Yes.
Some jurisdictions that were used as examples don't do this. Why? I guess they're not following the law?
Cost allocation is done for a variety of reasons, and there are some jurisdictions that choose not to allocate funds as long as you pay for those funds that you don't, or the services that you don't allocate out, as long as you pay for those out of the general fund and don't bill any other restricted source, then it's still legal. And I believe Mr. Halverson had presented that as part of his document that he sent to you. But there, quite frankly, that brings into question the equity and brings us under additional scrutiny from the auditor, the state auditor, the federal auditors. One of the things they look for is that is everybody paying their fair share? But you can choose to pay for some of those costs out of the general fund.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Isn't there a possibility on, I know this is off topic, but isn't there a possibility of just keeping the same structure, interfund and all that, so, and then the board just allocating like an amount to basically to help the lake management districts, like basically just on top of the underlying structure of the cost allocation, we basically say, here's $15,000 to help you do your work because you're helping the county.
Yes, yes, and I would strongly urge you to go down that path rather than trying to redo the cost allocation. Cost allocation's pretty complicated, and it's not that we couldn't identify parts to just go to the general fund, but if you choose to supplement any fund out of the general fund, that's your decision to make. We do that for the parks fund, the fair fund. We do that for the social services fund to support housing programs. So that would be very much in keeping with things that we currently do.
So what is Commissioner Menser lost me there? Doing what exactly?
So you could authorize, let's say, $10,000, just as a number. You could decide to authorize a $10,000 transfer from the general fund to a lake management fund in support. That would be in addition to the revenue that they collect from the property owners.
So you'd be like, the budget would reflect that there's these costs and it would reflect the true cost of the thing, but we would be basically saying, here's some money to help defray all of your expenses from the general fund that the county is supporting Lake Management District, rather than trying to say, doing more complicated, that Mr. Halverson's, they basically proposed that actually. That's where I got the idea. They said, do this or do that.
Yeah, you could do that. And that, in my opinion, is a much cleaner way.
That's what I was thinking. All right, go ahead.
All right. So back to the item at hand. Line 62 for emergency management is a correction for half of an FTE that I believe is a technical error because it was not allocated properly.
Yes. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Romero.
Yes, that's a technical correction because the position itself was not reduced to a 0.25. The position still remains as a 0.5 FTE, but the funding for some reason was reduced. So this is a technical correction to fully fund the half-time position.
I think it's part of our challenge with allocations in Questica.
Right.
Yeah, this has come up a few times. So line 63 is for Public Works. This is to transfer a project out of operating to a capital appropriation. Apparently, it is so technical that there is zero impact because I don't see any money. Either that or we haven't gotten the numbers in yet. And again, these numbers, we have not had these requests very long, but it's completely technical.
Have their hand up. Denise, I thought this was a park impact fee.
So all this is, it was my mistake. So when we added the, this project in last fall, all I did is I accidentally put it in the operating budget and not the capital budget. So there's no impact because the dollars are exactly the same. So there's a plus and a minus. I'm just moving it into the right part of the budget. So I actually put it in, I made the mistake and put in the fix.
Right.
Is this a park impact fee project, Romero?
Yes, sir. That's how it's going to be funded. And if I just to give you an update, I just finalized a draft in local agreement, and I just sent to the city of Rainier for their review. So after the review is done, I should be bringing that document for a formal action by the board. And at that point, then that it will be the contribution from the park impact fees for their recreation project.
Thank you.
Okay, and then finally, under technical is line 64, which again is an allocation issue in community planning. Again, this one's going, it's less, not more, because too much was allocated. So $11,000 less to the general fund. So we hit a grand total then, as you saw on your summary page in the PowerPoint presentation, revenue changes, increased revenue in the general fund of almost 45,000, expenditure changes of just under 636,000 in the general fund, and then impact in all these other funds, largely because of the distribution of the credit card rebate. So those are your technical. And I would also add that if you think of questions after this meeting, just please contact me and we'll make sure we follow up on them. So I'm going to now, I figured out how to share in this format and it's hard for me to find the stop sharing. Oh, that's because it's on a different screen. I'm gonna stop sharing that one. I'm going to close that worksheet and open the next one and then share again. Share my screen to make it bigger. This is your operating carry forward requests. These are mainly capital, not all capital, but, oh no, none capital here. They're all operating. That's in the title. So the majority of them are coming out of Public Works. And again, these are projects that were approved by the board in 2020, but not completed in 2020. And the department needs to be able to continue these projects to finish them this year. So lines, going to the very top, line number 1 is for historic preservation grants. These are grants that the board approved last year in the amount of $45,000 out of the Historic Preservation Fund. They were not spent. Those projects continue to be worked on this year. Line number 2 is in central services. Equipment that was approved for purchase on the equipment list. The purchase was, or rather the equipment was ordered, but not received. And if, again, this is an accounting rule, so this could have been on the technical amendments, but accounting rules dictate that if you have not received a good or service, you cannot pay for it. So there are extremely few things that government prepays, and equipment is not one of them. So we didn't receive the equipment we ordered. We have to pay for it this year. Central Services needs the appropriation authority. Line number 3 is for the, well, 3 and 4 is the water and sewer utilities system plan updates. Both Boston Harbor and Grand Mound are contributing to the cost of the update of this plan. Again, the project approved last year, continuing on this year because it was not completed. The next 2 items are for the, well, quite a few items for the development of standards for the utilities. These add up to about $3,000 in Public Works. Then you have the cost of the utility, or rather the utility cost of services study continuing in this year. These add up to about $10,000. Lines 13 through 16 is the utilities ordinance update. $22,000 is coming forward from last year. Line 17 is regarding the Capitol Lake Deschutes Estuary Work Group funding. That's where we are paying in to part of the cost of the EIS on Capitol Lake that's currently being conducted by the Washington State Department of Enterprise Services. Started that this last year, but this year we're actually receiving the bills. Public Works needs the ability to pay. Line number 18 is $112,000 for the stormwater utility WSDOT, which is Washington State Department of Transportation, Facilities Evaluation and Planning. So that study is continuing on this year. Again, approved in last year's budget. Here we are on line 19. A purchase was approved last year but not received in 2020 for a digital printer and laminator for the production of traffic signs. Line number 20 is 126,000 carrying forward in funding for the Mullen Road project. And this is for professional services, which is why it's not in capital. The same with 2021, 150,000 in professional services for the Black Lake Bridge project. And then finally, line 2020, line 22, not 2022. Line 22 is 69,000 for the roads fund study, again, begun last year and carrying into this year. So here is the summary of the funds that are impacted. The majority of them are not large impacts. The money is in the fund balance in each of these funds because it was not spent last year for a total of $3.3 million. Questions about the carry forward items? This is probably.
I have one question, Robin.
Yes, Commissioner.
Yeah, on that does that cover that revolving fund, equipment rental and revolving fund on line 2?
Yes.
And that money is like road money?
It was collected from all offices and departments that have vehicles that need to be replaced.
So we don't know how much is road and how much is general fund at this point, right?
That's right, but
Okay.
this equipment has already been ordered. We just didn't get it in the door by the end of December.
Okay. And that's not that 13th month or whatever, that doesn't fall in that category?
No, we have to actually receive it, and we can pay for it in the 13th month and have it be a 2020 cost if the equipment had arrived, but it didn't get here in time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and the money's already been collected over the past, I don't know how many years, depending on what kind of equipment it is, so it's sitting in the fund and available to use.
Okay.
And that money is collected by equipment, by piece of equipment. So each equipment has their own account.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Car, every yard goat. All right, that's carry forward.
Can we get through one more set here, Robin?
We should be able to get through maintenance.
Okay, good.
Pretty straightforward one. So there's really only 2 items on what looks like a very long list. The first item is lines 1 through 76, and this is the annual adjustment of the ending fund balance. And this amendment, it comes before you every spring. When we build the budget, every office and department that is the administrator of a fund projects how much they think the ending fund balance is going to be. And there are a ton of factors that go into that, but around August, early to mid-August, each of the fund administrators is thinking, okay, I'm going to bring in this much more revenue, I'm going to spend this much, here's how much my ending fund balance is. It's the best guess at the time we have to enter it into the system. Well, 6 months later, we close the fiscal year and we know what the actual ending fund balance is. And then we bring this adjustment to you so that we can make it in the system. Because it's recorded as a revenue transaction, it must be approved by the board. But it's maintenance level because it's It's a transaction that maintains our current funding approvals and authorities. It's nothing new. It could be classified as a technical change. But you see going down the list that the adjustment revenue came in so much better than we ever thought in the general fund, and expenditures were less. So the ending fund balance is increased by $6.42 million in the general fund. Now, I have already factored that into the forecast that you've seen this year. So you won't see a big jump in the ending fund balance again. You already saw that. But now is the time to make the technical change. I see that the following lines are dollars and cents. So there is a decimal in there. Family Court Services is line 2, and I'm not going to go through every one of these, but I'm just trying to give you a few examples of the way this works. So in the Family Court Services Fund, that fund balance is being reduced by $63,361 because either they didn't get as much revenue or they spent more than they thought they would at the time the fund balance was estimated. The same with the Fair Fund. CPED estimates that the ending fund balance is actually $23,453, less than they thought it would be. The law library is $51,000 more than they thought it would be, and so on down the list. So do you have any questions about that?
Yeah, just one.
Yes.
If we've got a deficiency, for an example, we didn't bring revenue in, maybe because of COVID or whatever, are we able to backfill with COVID money?
So that is one of the things that we are looking at. We are going line by line, looking at all of our 2020 revenue. Right. And if we can say we lost revenue in 2020, we are going to claim it from the new American Rescue Plan. We have to wait for the Treasury guidance. But I think that we're in a pretty good position. We don't have to look at that in aggregate. We're going to look at every line.
Okay, good. We might end up with a little more in the budget to help the lakes out, possibly. Huh? Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
What else? Isn't there a final line there about the prosecutor?
Yeah. The last line on the maintenance level is the prosecutor contracts with Tumwater for legal services. Their contract is less than they had anticipated, so they're reducing the amount of the contract and the appropriation authority that goes with that. So less services being provided, less cost that the prosecutor incurs. So that's, and again, you know, you're going to see the impact on every single fund because we adjust the balance in every single fund. No estimate is perfect. The best we know at the time. So that's maintenance level, and I'm going to get my cursor to the other screen to stop sharing. We are at time. We'll continue. These are the easy ones that you've seen today. The grant should be pretty easy. It's when we hit the policy requests that I think there's going to be more discussion. So we'll pick those up next week. And any closing comments?
Pretty complicated stuff.
Make sure we have enough time to get through. I know that we've already adjusted the timetable, so we don't, you know, we're going to have to be efficient about it. The board's back in session at 2 p.m. for agricultural extension program overview, and just FYI, I will personally have a hard stop at 2:55. If the presentation goes longer, I'll just hand it over to the vice chair. So I'll see everybody back at 2 o'clock in recess.
Great. Thanks, everyone. And thank you, commissioners. I know that budget is kind of dry stuff. So thank you.
Love it, Robin.
So exciting.